The boardroom was all glass and steel, high above Boston Harbor, but it felt smaller than a shoebox. Cold air hummed from the vents, stiff with recycled oxygen. Dr. Cassandra Holt sat near the end of the long walnut table, invisible though her name was etched into the brass plaque outside the door. 47 floors up, she had designed the algorithms that predicted shipping routes with near-perfect accuracy, the ones that made Harrington Maritime worth billions. But today her voice was drowned under the laughter of men who barely knew how to run a model, only how to sell one. "Dr. Holt, fascinating charts," one director said, his grin all teeth, his tone heavy with dismissal. "But we're here to talk business, not theories. Leave the poetry to the academics." The room chuckled. Cassandra lowered her eyes, the faint tremor in her hand hidden beneath the sleeve of her blazer. She had prepared for weeks, but her words evaporated into the sterile light. Her silence made her smaller. Then her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Normally she would have ignored it, but something in the vibration made her chest tighten. She swiped, whispering, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was high, frightened, nearly erased by traffic noise. "Are you Noah's mom?" Cassandra's heart stuttered. She swallowed, tried to steady her breath. "Yes. Who is this?" A pause, then trembling words. "Your son fell. He hit his head. He's not waking up. There's blood." Her chair scraped back violently. Heads turned. "What did you just say?" she whispered. The girl on the line sniffled but pressed on, her determination steadying her fear. "He was being chased. Some boys pushed him. They ran. He fell near the old construction site by Field's Corner. He's not moving." Cassandra didn't answer. She dropped the phone onto the table as though it had burned her. Papers scattered. The directors called her name, but she was already striding for the door, her heels striking like hammers. In the elevator, she jabbed at the button so hard her thumb ached. Breath came shallow, ragged. Outside, the city's hum was cruelly indifferent. She ran, something she hadn't done in years, weaving through pedestrians and cabs, coat flaring behind her. The harbor smell of diesel and salt clung to the air. Her mind spun with fragments of Noah. His 12th birthday she had missed because of a symposium. The sketchbook he had slipped into her briefcase without her noticing. The way he used to wait at the window when she came home late, and how, lately, he no longer bothered. It took 13 agonizing minutes for her to reach the site. Ambulance lights strobed across the crumbling brick and chain-link fences. The world narrowed. Cassandra pushed through the small knot of onlookers and dropped to her knees beside the stretcher. "Noah!" His name tore from her throat. Her boy's face was pale, streaked with dirt and blood. His lips were parted, his lashes unmoving against skin too still. She reached for him, but a paramedic caught her wrist. "Ma'am, please. We need space." "He's my son," she rasped. "He's my only." "He has a pulse," the medic said firmly, though his eyes betrayed urgency. "But we need to move him now." They lifted Noah onto the gurney. Cassandra's body refused to rise at first, anchored by dread. Then she forced herself to stand, and that was when she saw her. A girl no taller than the dented trash barrel beside her. 8, maybe 9. Dark skin, red hoodie 3 sizes too big, jeans soaked to the knees. She clutched a cracked phone in both hands, knuckles raw and white from cold. Her lips were blue, but her eyes, locked on Noah, blazed with something Cassandra hadn't seen in years. Unselfish, unguarded concern. Cassandra stepped toward her, words catching in her throat. Did you call me?" The child nodded, hugging herself. "Yes, ma'am." "You stayed with him?" "I didn't want him to be alone. He cried before he closed his eyes." The words cut deeper than the winter wind slicing Cassandra's face. She studied the girl's trembling frame, the shoes with no socks, the defiance holding her upright. You should be somewhere warm, Cassandra whispered. The girl shook her head. Couldn't leave him. Something hot stung Cassandra's eyes. She fumbled for her wallet, but when she pulled out cash, the girl flinched back. No, ma'am. I don't want money. Then what do you want? The child's gaze flicked to the ambulance, lights painting her face in blue and red. I just hoped someone would care enough to come for him. The words landed like a fist. Cassandra froze, breath caught in her throat. For a moment she forgot the sirens, the shouting medics, the boardroom she had abandoned. All she saw was this child, this stranger, who had done more for her son than she had in months. I'm Cassandra, she said softly. The girl hesitated, then whispered, Lila. The paramedics called from the ambulance. Cassandra turned, torn in two. She pulled off her scarf and wrapped it gently around Lila's shoulders. Thank you, she murmured. Lila blinked up at her. But that's yours. I'll be fine, Cassandra's voice cracked. You saved my son. She backed toward the ambulance, eyes fixed on Lila until the doors slammed shut. Through the small glass window, she caught the last image of the child standing still in the cold, scarf too big around her small frame. Lila lifted one hand in the faintest wave. Not playful, not dramatic. Quiet. The ambulance roared forward. Cassandra's hands trembled on her lap as the city blurred past, neon bleeding into night. She thought of Lila's words. I hoped someone would care enough. In the hospital, machines hummed, monitors flickered, nurses whispered. Cassandra sat beside Noah's bed, staring at his fragile chest rising under sterile light. She was a woman who had bent equations to her will, made investors bow to her intellect, built models that mapped oceans. Yet here, at the bedside of her son, she was powerless. At 9:47, when she finally stepped into the ER lobby, she stopped short. On a hard plastic chair in the corner, curled small but still awake, sat Lila. Scarf wrapped tight, sipping from a paper cup of cocoa. Cassandra's breath caught. The girl looked up. Their eyes met across the fluorescent silence, and something shifted, subtle but unstoppable. A seed breaking through the frost. The hospital at night breathed in low hums and muted footsteps. Fluorescent lights flickered against polished linoleum, shadows clinging to the corners like things too stubborn to leave. Cassandra stood frozen in the lobby, her briefcase still dangling absurdly from one hand, as though she had carried it through the storm by mistake. The girl in the corner did not move. Lila sat curled in the hard chair, Noah's scarf wound around her small shoulders, the paper cup trembling between her palms. She looked too small for the room, too steady for her age. Cassandra approached slowly, the echo of her heels softened against the cheap tile. He's stable, she said quietly. The words felt heavy in her mouth, as though she had borrowed them from the nurse. Still sleeping. The doctors think he'll wake soon. Lila nodded once, eyes fixed on the swirl of cocoa inside her cup. Good. You didn't have to stay, Cassandra added. I know. The simple reply unsettled her more than any show of gratitude could have. Cassandra lowered herself into the chair beside her, the leather of her coat creaking. For a long moment, neither spoke. The vending machine hummed in the corner. The security guard's snores drifted across the lobby like muffled thunder. Finally, Cassandra asked, Why did you? Lila's shoulders rose and fell. Because he was scared. I know what that feels like. The words slipped under Cassandra's skin, carrying a weight she did not want to name. She looked at this child, this stranger who had knelt beside Noah in the dirt when she had not been there. Gratitude tangled with shame in her chest. Do you have someone waiting for you? She asked. My grandma, Lila said. She's home, sick. I couldn't stay long. Cassandra hesitated, torn between logic and instinct. Then she reached for the scarf she had given earlier, adjusting it around the girl's thin shoulders. Lila looked up, her eyes catching the fluorescent light. For a moment, Cassandra thought she saw something unguarded there, something close to trust. "You saved my son," Cassandra whispered. "I won't forget that." Lila's lips curved into the faintest smile, crooked and brief, before she looked away. When Cassandra returned upstairs, Noah lay unmoving but calmer, the bruising along his temple softened by dim light. She sat beside him, folding her hands tight, and for the first time in years, prayed without words. Hours blurred into each other. At dawn, a nurse tapped softly at the door. "Dr. Holt, your boy's holding steady, no internal bleeding, just a mild concussion and bruises. He'll wake soon." Relief crashed over her, dizzying and strange. "Thank you." But when Cassandra descended again, the chair in the lobby was empty. The scarf was gone too. Only a paper cup, collapsed in on itself, remained on the floor. The city had swallowed Lila back whole. 2 days later, Noah stirred awake. His first word was fractured, but clear. "Mom?" Cassandra leaned forward, pressing her hand over his. "I'm here." He blinked slowly, lips dry. "Where's the girl?" The question jolted her. "Which girl?" "The one who stayed with me. She said it would be okay." Cassandra swallowed hard. "She's safe. Don't worry." But worry gnawed at her in silence. That evening, after Noah had drifted into a light sleep, she left the hospital again, driven by a pull she couldn't name. She retraced the path to Fields Corner, past shuttered bodegas and flickering street lamps. The neighborhood seemed older than the city itself, cracked brick and sagging porches, laundry lines sagging heavy with damp clothes. Apartment buildings leaned into each other like weary companions. She asked at a corner shop, describing the girl in the red hoodie. The owner, a tired man with gray stubble, shook his head. "Lot of kids like that around here." But when Cassandra stepped back into the street, she saw movement 2 blocks down. A small figure slipping into a run-down building, sneakers scraping against the stairs. The scarf, her scarf, flashed once before vanishing through a door marked 3B. She climbed the cracked steps, heart thudding. At the door, she hesitated, listening. A cough rasped inside, deep and wet. She knocked gently. The door creaked open to reveal a dim apartment, its air sharp with mildew and something burnt. A frail woman lay on the couch under mismatched blankets, her breath shallow. Her eyes opened with effort. "I'm looking for Lila," Cassandra said softly. The woman coughed again. "She's out. Maybe school, maybe store. Hard to keep track." "Are you her grandmother?" The woman nodded faintly. "Suppose so. It's just me and her. No one else." Cassandra scanned the room. Sparse furniture, no food on the counter, a single bowl in the sink. Survival pared down to its bone. "Do you have anyone who helps you?" she asked. The woman shook her head. "Just Lila. She's a good girl. Smarter than me." Cassandra felt her throat tighten. She wanted to wait, to see the girl return, but the grandmother's eyes drifted shut again, sinking into uneasy sleep. After 20 minutes of silence, Cassandra slipped back into the stairwell. Outside, the wind cut sharper than before. She pulled her coat tight, but the chill wasn't from the air. It was from the thought of Lila out there, unseen, walking streets that chewed up children and spit them out before they had time to grow. At the hospital, Noah greeted her with a weak smile. "Did you find her?" he asked. Cassandra sat heavily beside his bed. "Not yet." He looked down at his bandaged wrist. "She told me, even when nobody helps, you help. You don't need a reason." The words sank deep, and for a long moment Cassandra couldn't breathe. That night she lay awake in the hospital cot, staring at the ceiling's flickering light. Lila's words, Noah's words, blended into one relentless echo. You don't need a reason. And for the first time, Cassandra wondered if her life of equations and forecasts had been built not on certainty, but on avoidance. When she finally drifted to sleep near dawn, her last image was not of Noah's pale face or the boardroom she had abandoned, but of a small girl in a red hoodie, vanishing into a cracked doorway, carrying a weight too heavy for her thin shoulders. And in that image was a question she could not escape. Rain fell in thin needles across Boston, streaking the tall windows of the hospital and pooling along the sidewalks below. Cassandra sat at Noah's bedside, her hair pulled back in a loose knot, her blouse wrinkled from 2 days of restless sleep. Noah stirred fitfully, his bruised face turned toward the muted television. He had asked again about the girl, and each time Cassandra gave the same answer. Not yet. I haven't found her yet. But the words gnawed at her. They weren't good enough. By evening, the nurse brought a tray of food and lingered longer than usual. He's strong, she said, her voice kind. He'll bounce back faster than you think. Then, hesitating, she added, That little girl, the one who called, not many would have stayed, especially not her age. Most adults wouldn't have. Cassandra looked up sharply. Is she still here? The nurse shook her head. We tried the number she gave us. Nothing. She left this morning. Said she had to go back. Back. The word sank like a stone. Back to what? Later, as the corridors emptied and the night shift settled in, Cassandra stood by the window of the family lounge. The city lights shimmered through rain, each drop sliding down the glass like a tear. She remembered Lila's face, raw, tired, unflinching, remembered the scarf too big for her shoulders, and Noah's whisper, She told me it would be okay. She made a decision. The next afternoon, she drove across the city alone, her car weaving through traffic, past billboards and warehouses, past neighborhoods where the asphalt cracked into weeds. She parked near the building she had seen before, the one with the rusty buzzer, the faded numbers on the door. Apartment 3B. The stairwell reeked of damp plaster and cigarettes. Paint peeled from the banisters, and the steps groaned under her weight. She knocked, waited, knocked again. A long silence. Then shuffling. The door creaked open a few inches. Lila stood there, the scarf still wrapped around her neck. Her eyes widened at the sight of Cassandra. You shouldn't be here. I wanted to see you, Cassandra said, her voice gentler than she expected. Lila's grip tightened on the door. Behind her, Cassandra glimpsed the dim apartment, the grandmother coughing softly on the couch. You need to go, Lila whispered. I just want to talk. The girl hesitated, torn between fear and something softer. Then she opened the door wider. Cassandra stepped inside. The air was heavy, stifled by damp blankets and the faint smell of burnt rice. A small lamp flickered on the counter, its bulb buzzing. The grandmother raised her head weakly. You again. Yes, Cassandra said. I'm Cassandra Holt. I don't care what your name is, the old woman muttered. What do you want with us? Cassandra looked at Lila, then back at her. Your granddaughter saved my son's life. I owe her more than words. Lila's eyes flashed. We don't need your money. I'm not here with money. Cassandra's voice cracked. I'm here because no child should carry this alone. The room held its breath. Lila studied her with suspicion, but also with the faintest flicker of curiosity. The grandmother coughed again, her frail body shuddering. She carries plenty. Always has. No one's ever come around to take the weight off her. Something inside Cassandra shifted then. An old, buried ache. The years of silence between her and Noah, the missed birthdays, the dinners eaten across separate tables. She had believed absence was harmless so long as success paid the bills. But looking at Lila, she saw absence carved into a child's very frame. "You don't have to trust me," Cassandra said softly. "But I want to help. You've already given me more than I deserve." Lila's brow furrowed, confusion cracking her guarded mask. She opened her mouth, but the knock at the door interrupted her. 3 hard raps. The grandmother startled. "That'll be the landlord." Lila froze, then darted forward. "Don't open it." "Why not?" Cassandra asked. But Lila was already slipping into the narrow hallway, shoulders stiff, every muscle tensed. The knock came again, sharper this time. Cassandra felt her stomach clench. She followed. Lila put her eye to the peephole. A man stood outside, his shadow spilling across the stairwell. Cigarette smoke drifted past the crack. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's him." "Who?" Cassandra asked. Lila stepped back, her small fists balled. "Just go. Please." The knock turned into pounding. Cassandra's chest tightened. Whoever he was, Lila's fear was raw, instinctive, not learned in a day. "I'm not leaving you here," Cassandra said firmly. The pounding stopped. Silence pressed against the door. Cassandra's pulse thundered in her ears. Then footsteps retreated down the stairs, slow, deliberate. Only when the stairwell door slammed shut did Lila breathe again. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, chest heaving. "Who was that?" Cassandra asked. Lila opened her eyes, and for the first time, Cassandra saw tears clinging there, unshed. "Someone who doesn't like it when I say no." The words lingered like smoke. The grandmother called faintly from the other room. "Lila, who was it?" "No one," Lila answered quickly. Then, turning back to Cassandra, she whispered, "You really shouldn't have come." But the truth was clear in her eyes. She wanted someone to come. Cassandra crouched to meet her gaze. "If he comes back, you call me. Do you understand?" Lila shook her head. "He'll know." "Then let him know." The girl flinched, as if the idea itself was dangerous. Cassandra reached into her bag, pulled out a card, pressed it into her hand. "This has my number, day or night. You saved my son. Let me try to save you." Lila looked down at the card as though it might burn her fingers. She didn't answer. Cassandra stood, heart still hammering, and slipped out into the rain-slick stairwell. As she descended, she felt the girl's eyes on her back, following her down the stairs, across the street, into the blur of city lights. By the time Cassandra reached her car, the scarf was gone from her shoulders. She glanced back, saw it fluttering faintly through the cracked window above. Lila had kept it. Cassandra closed her eyes, hand pressed hard against the steering wheel. She knew, with a clarity sharper than anything she had modeled or calculated, that she had stepped into something far larger than herself. And there was no going back. The days blurred together in a rhythm of monitors and muted footsteps. Noah's color returned slowly, though the bruises spread like shadows along his cheekbone. Cassandra sat with him through long hours of silence. She tried reading, tried working, but every time she lifted her tablet, the graphs and numbers looked like another language. Her son's breathing was the only data she could measure now, the rise and fall of his chest against sterile sheets. He spoke more each day. Sometimes about school, sometimes about things she didn't know he carried. "They film everything," he murmured once, eyes heavy. "Even when you're bleeding." The words made her throat close. She touched his hair but said nothing. Silence seemed safer than promises she couldn't keep. By the third night, Noah was strong enough to eat pudding from a plastic cup. Cassandra excused herself, saying she'd get coffee. But she wasn't thirsty. She went down to the lobby again, as if drawn. The chair was empty now, of course. The place where Lila had sat looked colder without her. Cassandra stood there longer than she meant to, staring at the ghost of a child who had stayed when no one else had. The next morning, her assistant appeared at the hospital with clothes, files, and a brisk report of missed calls. "Investors are nervous," he said. "You disappeared mid-meeting, and no one knows when you'll return." "I don't care," Cassandra answered. Her voice was so calm it startled even her. He tried again. "There are consequences." "There already are," she cut in. She walked away, leaving him staring after her. Later that day, she found herself back outside the crumbling apartment building. The rain had eased, leaving puddles in the cracked pavement. She climbed the same stairwell, knocked once, twice. No answer. She tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the air was thicker than before. The grandmother lay on the couch, her breathing shallow, damp hair plastered to her forehead. Cassandra stepped closer. "Are you all right?" The woman stirred, coughed, tried to sit. "Where's Lila?" Cassandra asked. "Out," the woman wheezed. "Always out. Brings back crackers, sometimes juice. I can't keep her safe." The words rattled through the room. Cassandra stood in the stillness, the weight of helplessness pressing down. She moved to the window. Outside, a group of teenagers laughed too loud on the corner, their sneakers slapping against wet concrete. The sound made her chest tighten. The door creaked behind her. Lila stepped in, damp hair curling under the hood of her sweatshirt. She stopped short at the sight of Cassandra. The scarf was still around her neck. "You again," she said, voice flat. "I wanted to see if you're safe," Cassandra said. "I told you you don't need money. I understand." Cassandra's voice softened. "But you do need someone." Lila's jaw tightened. She set the grocery bag on the counter, half a loaf of bread, a bruised apple, a carton of milk that looked close to sour. She crossed her arms, standing like a soldier at guard. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I should," Cassandra answered. The tension in the room felt sharp enough to cut. Then the grandmother coughed violently, breaking it. Lila darted to her side, fetching water, adjusting the blanket. Cassandra watched. The child's hands were quick, practiced, far too old for her small frame. When the cough subsided, Cassandra knelt beside Lila. "You can't carry all this alone." "I have to." "No, you don't." Lila looked up sharply. Her eyes were wet, but fierce. "If I don't, no one will." The words pierced something in Cassandra she had tried to bury for years. The image of Noah waiting by the window as a younger boy, waiting for a mother too busy to arrive on time, came back like a blade. She had left him to carry more than he ever should have. "I won't tell you what to do," Cassandra said softly. "But if you ever need me, if you ever want someone to stay, call me." Lila stared at her card still lying on the counter, untouched. She didn't answer. Cassandra left reluctantly, her footsteps echoing down the stairwell. Outside, dusk was falling, streetlights flickering awake. She reached her car but didn't get in. Instead, she leaned against the door, watching the building as though willing the child to reappear at the window. Nothing. Only silence and the faint clatter of dishes from somewhere above. That night, Noah woke again, stronger this time. "Did you find her?" he asked. "I saw her," Cassandra admitted. His lips parted in relief. "Good. She's not safe." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Then help her," Noah whispered, as though it were the simplest thing in the world. Cassandra sat back, the weight of his trust pressing into her chest. She had spent her life forecasting the paths of ships across oceans, predicting storms before they broke. But she had not seen this storm coming. Two children colliding into her life, one her own, the other a stranger who seemed suddenly inseparable from her. In the dim light, she pressed her hand over Noah's. He squeezed back weakly, his eyelids fluttering. "Don't let her disappear," he murmured. Then sleep pulled him under again. Cassandra stayed awake until dawn, watching the city's first light seep into the hospital room. When she finally rose to stretch, her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "The press has questions about your absence. They're circling." She ignored it. She opened Noah's sketchbook instead, flipping through pages filled with crooked lines and dreamscapes of bridges, towers, faces half drawn. On one page was a child in a hoodie too big for her frame, standing beside a boy with bruises. Underneath, in Noah's scrawl, the words, "She stayed." Cassandra closed the book slowly, her decision already forming like steel inside her. That afternoon, she drove back to the apartment, rain streaking across her windshield. She parked and stared at the cracked doorway of 3B. She thought of Noah's whisper, the drawing, the scarf. She thought of Lila's fierce little voice. "If I don't, no one will." She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. This time, she would not walk away. The city's pulse quickened as autumn deepened, a restless rhythm of sirens, rain, and hurried footsteps on wet sidewalks. Cassandra felt it in her bones, the unease that trailed her everywhere she went. At the hospital, Noah grew stronger, his skin warming, his voice less fragile, though he tired easily. She should have been relieved, but each improvement only sharpened her awareness of Lila's absence. Noah noticed too. One afternoon, as sunlight pooled weakly through the blinds, he asked, "She didn't come back, did she?" Cassandra shook her head. "Not yet." He turned away, tracing the edge of his bandage with his finger. "People don't come back, Mom. Not for me. Not for her." The words struck with quiet force. Cassandra leaned closer, brushing his hair back. "That's not true. I came back." Noah's eyes flicked to hers, doubtful. "Because you had to." The silence that followed was heavier than argument. Later that evening, after he had drifted to sleep, Cassandra found herself in her car again, parked outside the old apartment. She hadn't told Noah. Some things were easier left unsaid. The street lamps flickered on and off, casting fractured shadows across the pavement. From the stairwell, faint voices echoed, teenagers loitering, their laughter jagged, edged with menace. She climbed the stairs quietly, heart quickening. At 3B, she knocked. No answer. She knocked again, softer. Finally, the door cracked open. Lila stood there, eyes shadowed, hoodie zipped high. The scarf was gone. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I came to see if you're all right." Lila's gaze darted to the hallway. "He's been back." The air thinned. Cassandra kept her voice steady. "Did he hurt you?" "No." A pause. "Not yet." Her small hands tightened on the doorframe. Behind her, the grandmother's cough rattled faintly. Cassandra took a step closer, lowering her voice. "You can't keep facing this alone. You need help." Lila's jaw set stubbornly. "If we ask, they take me away. They put me somewhere worse. That's what happens." Cassandra froze. The weight of the words settled deep, undeniable. She wanted to argue, to tell the child she was wrong, but the truth lay bare in her tone. Systemic indifference had already brushed too close to her life. "You don't have to go through that again," Cassandra whispered. Lila's eyes burned suddenly, tears brimming but unshed. She shook her head violently, stepping back. "Please leave." The door slammed. Cassandra stood staring at the peeling paint, hand trembling against the wood. The hallway smelled of rust and mildew. Below, the sound of heavy footsteps rose up the stairwell. She turned quickly, descending fast, just as a figure emerged from the shadows. He was broad-shouldered, jacket torn at the sleeve, cigarette dangling from his lips. His eyes slid over her with cold recognition. You lost, lady? Cassandra's pulse surged. She kept walking, heels striking sharp. He smirked, flicked ash onto the floor, and leaned against the railing. Didn't think folks like you came around here. She didn't answer. Her car was 3 steps away, but the weight of his gaze followed her long after the engine roared to life. That night, she sat awake beside Noah's bed, replaying the encounter. The man's shadow lingered in her mind, threatening and real. She thought of Lila in that apartment, thin shoulders squared against storms too large for her. She thought of the grandmother's hollow cough. By dawn, exhaustion pulled at her, but she refused to close her eyes. The following day, Cassandra met with a lawyer, an old colleague who still owed her favors. They sat in his office overlooking Copley Square, papers stacked high, the scent of coffee strong in the air. I want to know what it would take to intervene, she said. Intervene in what? In a child's living situation. Not adoption, not yet. Just protection. The lawyer studied her carefully. This about Noah? No. Another child. He leaned back, sighing. You're talking about guardianship petitions, protective custody, maybe CPS involvement. It's messy, long, and it almost never goes the way you want it to. Cassandra clenched her jaw. What if she's in danger? Then you call CPS, but be careful. Once you do, you lose control. The system takes over. The words chilled her. She had spent her career modeling chaos, managing risk. But this wasn't math. This was flesh and blood, a girl with eyes too old for her years. Back at the hospital, Noah greeted her with a tired smile. You're late. I was asking questions, she admitted. His brows furrowed. About her? Yes. He nodded slowly, as though this were inevitable. Don't let her vanish, Mom. That evening, Cassandra drove to Dorchester again, but she didn't approach the apartment. She parked across the street, watching shadows shift in the windows. Hours passed. At one point, the door opened. Lila stepped out, pulling her hood low, clutching a grocery bag. She moved quickly, head down. Cassandra's hand hovered over the door handle, but she didn't get out. Something held her back. The knowledge that too much presence might spook the girl, might push her deeper into silence. So she waited. Lila returned half an hour later, disappearing into the stairwell. Moments later, another figure emerged instead. The same man from before, cigarette glowing red in the dark. He glanced up and down the street, then climbed the stairs 2 at a time. Cassandra gripped the steering wheel, her breath sharp. She wanted to run, to stop him, to shield the child waiting upstairs, but fear rooted her in place. The reality of her own fragility stark against his looming figure. The stairwell light flickered, then went dark. Through the windshield, Cassandra stared at the doorway of 3B, her chest burning with helplessness. The rain began again, thin needles across the glass, and she sat frozen as the shadow swallowed the stairwell whole. The stairwell swallowed the man whole, and for a moment Cassandra couldn't move. The rain ticked against her windshield like a clock counting down, each drop a reminder that she was sitting still while something dangerous rose inside that crumbling building. She gripped the wheel until her knuckles ached, fighting the instinct to drive away. But when she pictured Noah's bruised face, when she heard Lila's voice in her mind, if I don't, no one will. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the wet street. Her heels clicked against the pavement, sharp and loud in the silence. She crossed quickly, heart pounding, the stairwell looming before her. The door groaned as she pushed inside. The smell of smoke and mildew closed around her. Voices drifted from above, low, tense. A man's murmur. Then Lila's, thin and sharp, trying to sound braver than she felt. Cassandra climbed slowly, every step an act of defiance. When she reached the 3rd floor, the hallway stretched narrow and dim, paint peeling from the walls. The door to 3B was half open. She could see the man's back, broad shoulders hunched, his head lowered toward Lila, who stood rigid by the counter. "You owe," he said, voice rough with smoke. "And when you can't pay, you find another way." Lila's chin lifted, trembling but unyielding. "We don't owe you anything." The grandmother coughed weakly from the couch, trying to push herself upright. The man ignored her. Cassandra stepped forward. "Leave her alone." The man turned, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her. Surprise flashed, then amusement. "And who are you?" "I'm someone who won't let you touch her." He chuckled, stepping closer. "Lady, this isn't your block. You don't belong here." "Neither do you," Cassandra shot back, though her voice quivered under the weight of fear. He studied her, smirk curling. "Rich type, huh? Car out front, shoes that cost more than this month's rent? You think you can just walk in here and fix things?" Her throat tightened, but she held her ground. "I think I can walk in here and tell you to leave a child alone." For a moment, silence coiled between them, heavy as a drawn blade. Then he leaned close, smoke on his breath. "Careful, lady. You might just end up broken like the rest." Behind him, Lila's small voice cut through the tension. "She's not like you." The man's smirk faltered. He glanced back at her, annoyance flickering. That was all Cassandra needed. She stepped forward, pulling her phone from her pocket. "I'll call the police. Right now." His eyes hardened. "And say what? That you barged into a neighborhood that isn't yours? That you think a judge will believe a stranger over me?" The words stung with truth, but Cassandra didn't falter. She raised the phone higher, thumb hovering over the screen. "Try me." For a long, taut moment, she thought he would strike her. His hand twitched at his side. Then, with a low curse, he spat on the floor and shoved past her, storming down the stairwell. The door slammed below, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Cassandra's knees threatened to buckle, but she forced herself upright. Lila stood frozen, fists clenched, eyes wide. "He'll come back," Lila whispered. "Not if I can stop him," Cassandra said, though the promise felt fragile in her mouth. The grandmother wheezed from the couch, trying to sit. "He's been circling for months. She's right. He always comes back." Cassandra turned to her, then back to Lila. "You need protection. Both of you." Lila shook her head violently. "If you call anyone, they'll take me away. They'll split us apart. They don't care what happens after." Her words cracked, raw with fear. Cassandra felt her chest tighten. She wanted to argue, but she knew the girl wasn't wrong. The system had a way of turning rescue into punishment. "I won't let them take you," Cassandra said. "Not without me fighting for you." Lila blinked, uncertain. "Why? Why would you fight for me?" The question hung like smoke in the air. Cassandra searched for the right words, but all she found was the truth. "Because you stayed with my son when no one else did. And because you shouldn't have to stand alone anymore." The silence that followed was heavy but different this time. Not suffocating, waiting. The grandmother sank back into her blankets, too weak to speak. Lila stood rigid, eyes shimmering with something caught between mistrust and fragile hope. Finally, she whispered, "If you fight, don't lose." Cassandra reached for her hand, but the girl pulled back. Not rejection, just hesitation. Outside, the storm picked up again, rain hammering the broken glass of the stairwell window. Cassandra knew she couldn't linger. She gave one last look at Lila, small, defiant, trembling but unbroken, and stepped into the hall. When she reached her car, she sat trembling, replaying every second. The man's smirk, his threat, Lila's voice cutting through the dark. She dialed her lawyer before she could lose her nerve. "We move now," she said into the phone. "I don't care how messy it gets. I won't let him come back for her." The lawyer's sigh echoed through the line. "You're stepping into a storm, Cassandra. Once this begins, you can't control how it ends." She stared at the apartment building through the rain-smeared windshield. "Then I'll stand in the middle of it." As she ended the call, a shadow moved at the corner of the street. The man had returned, cigarette glowing red in the darkness, his eyes turned toward her car. Her breath caught. The storm had already begun. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper, a place where lives were measured in filings and signatures. Cassandra sat at the end of the long hallway, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap. Her lawyer shuffled through a folder beside her, murmuring about guardianship statutes and the unpredictable rhythm of family court. She heard none of it. She was still replaying the cigarette glow outside her car, the man's stare through the rain, the way Lila's voice had trembled but refused to break. "You're walking a thin line," the lawyer said at last, pulling her back. "Petitioning for emergency guardianship without blood relation is uphill. They'll ask why you care. They'll ask what stake you have." Cassandra thought of Noah's sketchbook, the page where Lila stood in crooked pencil lines. She thought of the girl's words. "If I don't, no one will." "Then I'll give them an answer," she said. That evening, back at the hospital, Noah was drawing again, the tip of his pencil scratching quietly across the page. He looked up when she entered. "Did you see her?" Cassandra hesitated. "Yes." "She's holding on." "Did you promise her?" Her throat tightened. "I promised I'd fight." Noah nodded slowly, as if that was enough for now. He returned to his drawing, but his hand trembled. On the paper, the lines formed the outline of a building with cracked windows and a girl in a scarf standing at the door. Cassandra's chest ached. The next morning she drove to Dorchester again, this time with groceries in the back seat. Milk, bread, canned soup, cough medicine. She carried the bags up the narrow stairs. When the door opened, Lila stood there, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it. "You didn't have to come," she said. "Yes, I did." Cassandra handed her the bags. "For your grandmother." Lila hesitated, then accepted them, setting them on the counter. The apartment smelled faintly of damp wool and illness. The grandmother was curled under her blanket, too weak to lift her head. "You shouldn't waste your time," Lila muttered, but softer this time. Cassandra crouched to meet her eyes. "You're not a waste." Lila blinked, the words hitting her like something foreign. She turned away quickly, busying herself with unpacking. Cassandra rose and studied the window, cracked at the frame, duct tape holding the glass. She wanted to fix everything at once, call doctors, replace locks, move them somewhere warm and safe. But she knew sudden rescue could feel like invasion. Instead, she said quietly, "I filed papers today, to make sure you're protected." Lila froze. "What kind of papers?" "Guardianship. It means I can stand for you in court. It means he can't just come back." Lila's voice dropped to a whisper. "And if they take me away?" "I won't let them," Cassandra said. "Not without me beside you." The girl's shoulders shook, though she refused to cry. "People say that. Then they leave." Cassandra reached out but stopped short of touching her. "I'm still here." The sound of boots in the stairwell made them both flinch. Heavy, deliberate. Lila's eyes widened. She darted to the window, peeking through the torn curtain. Her face paled. "It's him." Cassandra's heart slammed against her ribs. She pulled Lila back, stepping between her and the door. The knock came hard, rattling the frame. "Open up!" the man's voice barked. The grandmother stirred weakly, coughing. Lila clutched Cassandra's sleeve. The knock turned to pounding. Cassandra's mind raced. She pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the emergency dial. "Don't," Lila whispered urgently. "If you call, they'll know. He'll tell everyone. It'll be worse. The pounding grew louder. I said, open up! Cassandra swallowed hard. Her body screamed to flee, but something stronger held her in place. She squared her shoulders, motioned for Lila to stay behind her, and stepped to the door. Leave them alone, she said through the wood, voice shaking but firm. Silence. Then a laugh, low and cruel. You again. Lady, you're in the wrong story. Cassandra tightened her grip on the phone. If you don't leave, I call the police. The laugh faded. The stairwell fell still. Then the sound of footsteps retreating, slow and heavy. The outer door slammed shut below. Lila sagged against the wall, breathing fast. Cassandra put a hand on her shoulder. He's gone. No, Lila whispered. He never goes. He just waits. The truth in her voice chilled Cassandra more than the man's threats. She walked back to her car minutes later, her chest hollow, her mind racing. She couldn't watch the door forever. The law had to work, or the system would swallow Lila whole. Her phone buzzed as she slid into the driver's seat. A message from her lawyer. Court scheduled. 3 days. Be ready to prove why she belongs with you. Cassandra stared at the words, the glow of the screen lighting her pale face. She imagined standing before a judge, explaining why she had left her boardroom, why she had abandoned investors, why a stranger's child had become as urgent as her own blood. Her reflection in the glass was steady but haunted. She whispered into the silence, because she stayed, and now I have to. Through the windshield, she caught movement in the shadows across the street. A cigarette flared, a figure leaning against the lamppost, watching. Her breath caught. The fight wasn't waiting for court. It had already begun. The morning of the hearing broke with gray skies, the kind that pressed low over the city and blurred the edges of buildings. Cassandra dressed slowly in her apartment, her hands steady only because she forced them to be. The mirror showed her a woman in a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back, face pale but resolved. It was armor, nothing more. Down the hall, Noah waited with his backpack slung over one shoulder. He had asked to come, and though part of her wanted to shield him, she hadn't said no. When she looked at him now, she saw a boy who had been through too much silence and who deserved to see what courage looked like when spoken aloud. At the courthouse, Lila was already there, standing with her grandmother near the entrance. The girl's scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck, eyes sharp, mouth set. When she saw Cassandra, she didn't smile, but she stepped closer. You came, she said quietly. I told you I would. The grandmother touched Cassandra's arm briefly, gratitude flickering in her tired eyes before they entered the building. The courtroom itself was smaller than Cassandra expected. Polished benches, a single flag drooping at one corner, the judge's bench raised like a stage. The air smelled of paper and floor polish. It felt less like justice and more like theater, but it was here they would decide Lila's future. The judge, a tall black woman with silver hair and glasses, called the session to order. Her tone was even, her gaze sharp. Cassandra sat at the petitioner's table with her lawyer, across from the state representative from Child Services. Lila and her grandmother sat in the gallery, their presence both fragile and unyielding. The state began. The representative spoke of procedure, of the importance of structured foster systems, of the risks of sudden guardianship by unrelated parties. Words like stability, oversight, and due diligence echoed in the room. Cassandra felt each syllable tightening around her like a noose. Then it was her turn. Her lawyer gestured for her to stand. Cassandra rose, her legs heavier than they should have been, her heart thundering in her chest. She looked at the judge, then at Lila, then finally at Noah in the back row. His pencil sketchpad rested on his lap, open, a new drawing half finished. Lila with her arms crossed, head high. Cassandra drew breath. Your Honor, she began, her voice quieter than intended but steady. I'm not here because I wanted to be. I'm here because a child called me when no one else would. She told them about that night, the phone vibrating in her hand, the voice trembling but brave, the boy bleeding on the concrete, the girl who refused to leave him. She spoke of walking into their apartment, of the cracked windows, the sick grandmother, the silence of neglect. She admitted her own failures, the boardrooms where she had drowned her life, the son she had nearly lost to distance. I don't stand here as a savior, she said, her throat tightening. I stand here as someone who saw a child's strength and realized my silence was cowardice. She deserves protection, not because she is broken, but because she is extraordinary. And if the law cannot see that, then the law is looking the wrong way. The room was hushed. Even the child services representative leaned back, hands folded, expression unreadable. The judge's gaze lingered on Cassandra a moment longer, then shifted to Lila. Miss Jameson, she said gently, would you like to speak? Lila's small frame looked impossibly fragile as she walked to the stand. Her scarf trailed down her side, the ends frayed. She climbed the single step, turned, and faced the room. I don't know all the laws, she said. Her voice cracked once, then steadied. I just know what it feels like when people look away. She didn't. That's all. The simplicity struck harder than any argument. Cassandra's chest burned. The judge thanked her and motioned her back. Then she reviewed the papers, the testimonies, the records. Silence stretched, every second pulling tighter. Finally, the judge spoke. This case is unusual. It does not fit neatly within the bounds of statute. But lives rarely do. I am granting temporary guardianship to Cassandra Holt, with monthly oversight and visitation rights maintained for the grandmother. We will revisit in 90 days. The gavel struck once, final, echoing. Cassandra exhaled, knees threatening to buckle. Noah grinned faintly from the back. Lila didn't smile. She simply looked at Cassandra, eyes wide, and gave the smallest nod, as if to say the fight had only just begun, but at least now she wasn't alone. Outside, the air was sharp with wind. Reporters had gathered, their cameras already raised, questions flying. Cassandra shielded Lila with her body, pushing forward, ignoring the noise. They reached her car. Noah climbed in, Lila following, silent but steady. As Cassandra started the engine, she saw him. Across the street. Leaning against a lamppost, cigarette glowing, the man's grin slow and poisonous. His eyes locked on Lila. Cassandra's hands froze on the wheel. Lila saw him too. Her face went pale, but she didn't flinch. Don't look, Cassandra whispered, pulling away from the curb. But she knew the truth. He wasn't gone. That night, the townhouse was quiet. Noah slept, pencil still in hand. Lila sat at the window in her borrowed pajamas, watching the rain streak down the glass. Cassandra entered, pausing in the doorway. You should rest, she said softly. I can't. Cassandra stepped closer. Because of him? Lila didn't answer. She just pressed her forehead to the cool glass, eyes searching the dark street below. Cassandra stood beside her, the two of them reflected together in the pain. One woman, one girl. Both scarred by silence, both fighting to be heard. Neither spoke. The rain whispered against the glass. Somewhere in the city, a door was half open, a man waiting. And though victory had been won in court, Cassandra knew the battle outside those walls had only just begun.